welcome to the next episode of FinOps Fridays. Today, we're going to be talking about SaaS. Is it going to be the next financial challenge? Is it going to be a mini version of the whole FinOps and cloud situation? Today, I'm joined here by Udam. Udam, give us a quick introduction, who you are, what's your background?
Hey, thank you, Nathan, and thanks for having me. So for me, I've been probably around the cloud revolution probably for the last dozen or so years. First in AWS, where I got to work on launching a couple of pretty successful services, Redshift and Aurora, and then I switched over to Apptio, where I worked on cloud cost management and optimization products, as well as led some teams building the cloud migration planning product. Now I'm at Citi, where I'm the head of cloud financial management, and that's mostly an engineering job. We're building tooling and capabilities for our platform so that people can do sound financial FinOps practices. Uh, but then also it's driving the culture shift within the organization and establishing best practices, those kinds of things. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. In terms of your role there as the head of CFM, you mentioned CFM Cloud Financial Management, aka FinOps, for those that may have joined us a bit late. You mentioned a few things. It's primarily an engineering role, but hey, also there's culture. What have been the main areas, like the broad sort of areas of focus that you have been looking at doing, and have they changed at all over time since you've been there?
Yeah, I mean, so just to kind of explain what we're doing first, what we're building is a cloud platform that's spanning multiple cloud vendors and SaaS vendors, and to try to do this at city scale, right? So, and to kind of appreciate that there's multiple tens of thousands of developers at Citi, which you wouldn't guess it being a financial services company. There's several thousands of applications across 95 countries and lines of businesses and legal entities. So it's a very kind of complex organizational structure. And we're trying to bring, kind of this FinOps idea to Citi into that structure. And, so really, we're starting with the basics, that I think most of us know about, like starting with the transparency. How do we provide this? But not just for the cloud. Again, it's also for the SaaS spend as well. And then, from there, do integration into the billing systems, drive more towards optimization and cost controls and budgeting, forecasting, those sorts of things. I would say the thing that I've noticed now that I'm on the consumer side as opposed to the cloud vendor or cost management vendor side is the problem is wider and larger than what we imagined when we were building the cost management tools, where really we focused on the cloud service providers. I think over time, this has gotten a much broader problem where, as you said, these SaaS vendors are just like mini cloud vendors, right? So focusing on kind of solving that problem more holistically at Citi right now.
Yep, awesome. And in terms of building capabilities, that's one thing. FinOps, we've really got to make sure that our users, be they financial, be they business management, be they technical, have to build their capability in FinOps. What are some of the key areas? As part of being on cloud, you're always learning, you're always getting better at doing cloud. Are there any specific areas that you've been focusing on building the user's capability around to really help in this FinOps journey? Something like focusing on things like serverless or focusing on transparency and dashboards. What has been in terms of getting them better at doing their job efficiently? What have been the main areas?
I'd say sort of adjusting our delivery. As you know, the cloud billing data and is very granular. It's very, it can be overwhelming. So for us, it's been about how do we take that and sort of build these capabilities in our platform in a way that folks can easily understand it and consume it and get value out of it, right? Because we're traditionally a data center based company. So this is going to be all new to our consumers. We don't want to start out with like the maximum amount of complexity. So we're trying to sort of figure out what's the right medium, right? What's the right level of data to provide so that we can get the maximum benefit. We can get people excited about seeing their usage in near real time, and then drive them towards that accountability for their spend that everybody wishes to get in FinOps. So those are our focus areas.
Awesome. Excellent. Now let's talk about SaaS. It was really good when we sort of reached out and said, hey, let's get you on the show. What do you want to talk about? And you mentioned SaaS. I've mentioned in a previous episode, I view SaaS almost as, a little cloud problem. We're looking at the problems of SaaS, vendor consumption, not understanding licenses. Is anyone actually looking at this? And it really does look like, it's just a mini version of cloud. You've got all this usage happening miraculously in the organization. It's getting paid for, but no one's really managing it. In terms of your view of SaaS as a consumer, what are you seeing? To you, what is SaaS?
Yeah. I'd say SaaS is a really broad category, right? And in its broadest definition, it's software and services that are offered via the internet for either businesses or end users. So, that right there could range from the Gmails to Office 365 to Zoom and Slack and Salesforce to maybe a slightly different category, which is the Redis and Snowflake and MongoDB Atlas and Confluence of the world, right? So from a FinOps perspective, if you look at that first group that I said, the O365s and Zooms and of the world, those are fairly static consumption models, right? And therefore you have subscription-based pricing. It's not that you don't need FinOps in that space. You need some FinOps for, making sure you do allocations and get visibility for that spend. But it's a lot of it is done upfront at procurement time, right? You get commitments from your various organizations. You're able to then go procure the contract, make the payments and whatnot. The second category of SaaS vendors that we discussed, they tend to have more dynamic consumption models and therefore dynamic pricing models and billing. And this is going to sound familiar, as you said, because that's the same problem we have with the cloud service providers, right? So I view them as an extension of the cloud service providers, and you really need strong FinOps, practices in order to go manage that spend, because it's dynamic and it's pay as you go in most cases, and you need to do accurate allocations in order to drive that accountability for that spend.
Awesome. And I like what you said there. You always need FinOps. And I think that's something that I always love to drill into my customers. No matter what it is, you have to be doing FinOps. It is never optional, no matter what. It's just going to be, and you summed it up really nicely there. If it's a static consumption model, well, it's going to be a pretty efficient cut down version of FinOps. You're not going to have to do the whole hog. It's going to be nice. Make sure that you're applying the right amount of FinOps, but you still need to do it.
Right.
Is it safe to sort of assume that for you, like SaaS is everything you're consuming except the cloud providers? Like you always treat the cloud service providers as themselves, and then SaaS is everything else. Like what about some of the things that are SaaS from the cloud service providers? Do you treat them as SaaS, or are they part of cloud service providers?
Ideally, I would think that all consumption-based, build services that you purchase, you sort of normalize and treat as one thing, regardless of the vendor, right? And in many ways, that's what the cost management tools are doing, or the vendors are doing. They're saying, okay, it doesn't matter if it's AWS or GCP or Azure. I'm going to normalize it so that you can look at it as what's my compute spend, what's my storage, what's my team X's cost, team Y's cost, so I would sort of look at it that way, as opposed to kind of separating them out. But I would separate. I think there's a clear delineation between those O365s and others versus kind of the more dynamic consumption model services that or SaaS vendors that especially when it comes to like, total cost of ownership of your applications and whatnot. Like you may not view some of those other things in the same vein as and because they're not really components that, you use to build your software, whereas the snowflakes and Confluence and whatnot are those things that go feed into your application total cost.
Yep, gotcha. And in terms of trends, what are you sort of like just stepping back? What are you seeing, industry wide and within your business? Things like changing of consumption, things like number of vendors. What are you actually seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing is huge adoption, right? Over the past 3, 4, 5 years, there's huge amount of adoption. There's an explosion of vendors out there, and what they're really doing is they're building these specialized products, let's say platform as a service, databases as a service, or generally speaking, software as a service. And their approach is to be really laser focused on solving a small set of problems and doing that really well. And both not just from a product perspective, but also an experience perspective for the developers and consumers, and to rapidly innovate in this, right? And what corporations are doing, so that's what the vendors are doing. The corporations, they're starting to take a more a la carte option or approach to this, where previously the decision was, hey, if we're tied to a cloud service provider, let's go use the data warehousing product, Redshift or BigQuery or whatever it may be. Whereas now they're saying, hey, engineering teams have a lot more freedom to go say, no, you know what, vendor X is our one, preferred choice, and you can sort of do this today because it's a lot easier to integrate these vendors with the cloud service providers in a secure manner, whether it be the VPN connectivity and VPC endpoints and all these kinds of things. It's much more acceptable today to go integrate these vendors in. So I think what that's driven is a huge amount of growth, and you can sort of see this, right? Like if you look at general like year-over-year growth for cloud service providers and then the SaaS vendors, and specifically in SaaS vendors also, if you look at these vendors that have kind of the on-premise or license-based offering versus the cloud offering, many times the cloud offering is growing at like 5, 10x of what the general growth is of the same product even. So I think there's explosive growth in adoption with these SaaS vendors. That's the first thing I would say is that I'm seeing.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I guess microservices are awesome, and we've been talking about those for many years. We're going down a similar path with actual SaaS and products that you're buying each one individually. I'm guessing that would also lead to just a large amount of different vendors. I don't want to talk about the actual integration of all these things because that's not terribly FinOpsy, but you now have to work with potentially many different formats of billing and consumption and usage, and that now becomes the challenge. Hey, I need integrations with 20, 30, 50 different providers now to be able to get that information and start to work with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly right. And as the space gets crowded with lots of vendors, they're also trying to differentiate themselves. Of course, primarily in the feature sets of the core products that they're offering, but also in the pricing and billing and discount models, that they offer, commitment-based discounts, lots of things that you see in, that you're familiar with in the cloud service space. So, I think all of this obviously adds, a ton of complexity, right? Like you could see where this is headed. The diversity in vendors and the pricing and billing concepts, it's going to, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but it is going to be a fairly big challenge for consumers.
Yeah, and I hope we haven't scared off every single one of our audience. Like, there's just more problems coming thick and fast. But yeah, like it's just cloud, version 2 type of thing. It's interesting to see everything transition down the path. Before we get into the magic solutions that Udam is going to provide to everything, and why we don't have to worry, we'll take a quick break for our speed round questions. This is where we get to learn about our guest a little bit more, ask them a few questions about their personal life. Udam, are you ready for the lightning round questions?
I'm ready.
Alrighty, let's get into it. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Definitely no.
Ooh, okay. Cat person or a dog person?
Dogs.
Red or white wine?
Red wine.
Beer or spirits?
Spirits.
Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Depends. If it's something where I'd get fired, whether in life or at work, I'm going to probably ask for permission. But otherwise, I'll use my moral compass to, to make a
Excellent.
judgment and beg for forgiveness if needed.
Favorite movie, director, producer, genre?
40-Year-Old Virgin. Yeah, I love that movie.
Tea or coffee?
Tequila.
Tea or coffee?
Tequila. Just kidding. No, I don't do either one.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Favorite TV series, genre?
I like Frontline. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one. It's a show here on public broadcast TV. A lot of investigative journalism type stuff. They go into a lot of topics for a few hours, and it's always very informative. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, we actually had a similar. Well, had the same name, but it was a satire of that particular field.
Okay.
Favorite song or musician?
I honestly listen to a wide variety of stuff nowadays, just whatever's on Spotify. But I'd say when in my younger days, probably a lot of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and those things.
Excellent. Your favorite food?
Anything my mom cooks when she's around. She's an excellent cook, so I enjoy that a lot when
What
I
type
get a
of food does she
chance.
cook?
She cooks a lot of different types, but specialty would be Sri Lankan food. That's where I'm from. But she's a baker by trade, so lots of baking things and different Italian food or whatever, different things. So she's just jack of all trades.
Awesome. When you want to go on a holiday, do you prefer to do activities or relax and do nothing?
Maybe a relaxed or half day. After that, I gotta be doing something.
Buildings and architecture or nature?
Nature.
Your
Definitely.
preferred superpower, supernatural ability?
I'd say superpower probably, maybe relevant for this day and age. Get people to see different perspectives, and not sort of be so tribal and sort of be stuck in their own ways.
Your favorite vacation location?
So many. Wherever I go, I find things that I like. But I'd say Italy is one. Wildlife in Africa, that's just some of my favorite memories. And then locally, I'd say Utah is one of my favorites. The national parks down there are just unbelievable.
Yeah, actually, I've seen a couple of pictures from those.
Yeah.
Text or talk?
Text. Yeah, I rarely talk on the phone now.
Childhood nickname?
Ernie from Sesame Street. Ever since I was a kid, that's what everyone calls me to this date. My parents, my wife, everybody calls me Ernie. So
Your proudest moment?
proudest moment would be probably the day my son was born. That was a pretty pretty proud day for me.
Beautiful. All right. Started off a little wobbly with the pineapple, but you went well. You get a score of 93 today.
93. All right.
All right, let's jump back into the SaaS. We spoke before, it is going to be like a little mini cloud in terms of the challenges. We look, at where cloud was 5, 8, 10 years ago. We're starting to see the sort of similar patterns emerge, the similar challenges. We've got lots of data, different types. We need to start to deal with it. We're now realizing the problem. We can't go back in time to redo cloud, but hey, we can sort of jump in front of this whole SaaS problem and nip it in the bud before it becomes a cloud-sized problem for us. What are some of the main challenges that you're seeing with SaaS that are sort of starting to pop up and started to deliver a bit of friction in your organization?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I sort of touched on this earlier, but the complexity that comes with the diversity in the space in terms of vendors, and then also the pricing and billing concepts is, I would say, the first challenge that I'd call out. And it comes at a time when corporations are barely starting to get their arms around, the cloud spend for the major vendors. People are starting to, ask questions and understand, okay, what is a reserved instance and how do I, account for costs for networking and all these kind of different things. Now you add to that, kind of this challenge of, tens of vendors that you might integrate in your infrastructure and services environments. And as we said, the problem is very much the same. It's a centrally purchased, dynamic, consumption model service. So you sort of have a lot of those same problems to go solve that you would with the cloud service providers. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that's the first one. I'd say secondary thing is the fact that these vendors are they have relatively unsophisticated capabilities when it comes to cost management today, right? Many of them are barely implementing things like tagging and tag-based billing and things like that. Um, and for the most part, they've been focused on trying to become relevant, going against the established services and the cloud service providers themselves, or the SaaS, the on-prem offerings that other vendors might have had. So, the focus has not really been on the cost management space, and this is eerily similar, as you said. And, I think it was in 2011 when I was in AWS. So the number, well, I don't know if it was the number one ask, but one of the major asks from the customer base at that time was give us better cost management tooling, right? And that spurred the innovation of tagging capability in AWS, which then led to tag-based billing in AWS, and then also spawned this whole category of software called like cloud cost management and optimization tools, right? So I feel like, as you said, we're sort of at that same spot with the SaaS where, yeah, we're probably places like Citi where we're large, complex, a lot of money going into these things, so we're going to maybe feel this pain first, but I suspect that it's going to be coming for most general use cases, fairly soon. And then the last thing I'd say is that, look, in this space, there's always this differentiation between direct spend and shared costs, right? Direct costs are fairly easy to kind of spot, but then allocating the shared component is a fairly challenging thing. And with SaaS, now you got to essentially account for the fact that you might have built VPN connectivity or resiliency and governance and security into these things. Somehow those costs also need to get allocated back, just like kind of the challenge you have with cloud costs. So getting that bigger picture view of total cost of ownership that includes the SaaS costs, including direct and shared, is another challenge that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I like what you're sort of talking about first, the complexity. In terms of the volume of data, it's probably not going to be the same size as cloud, but the difference between 10 and 100 lines, well, I can throw some compute horsepower and that's not a problem. But it's the
Mhm.
diversity in vendors, which, okay, yeah, we've got many different vendors, but one thing I sort of didn't realize you were saying there is the pricing terms that they've got different types that you need to completely look at every single vendor in a different way. Yeah, we've learned about RIs from AWS, commitment discounts, savings plans, but every vendor can have their own slightly different version. And
That's
I think that's also the challenge. When vendors don't want to use the same terminology, so they're not looked upon as following another vendor. Like maybe we'll just give that to JR at FinOps to just come up with a standard naming for everything in terms of FinOps that we can integrate with, adhere to one naming standard, and it'll just
Yeah.
make everyone's lives easier. That probably is not a bad task for the FinOps to attack, is to get some sort of standardization. Um,
Yeah.
in
I've
terms
been
of,
in JR's ear about this a little bit as well.
well, it's how do you get all these little startups and different vendors to say, actually, you need to follow what we've defined over here, please? No,
Yeah.
like it's going
Yeah.
to be hard to get
It's a
them.
tough challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of direct and shared costs, how big of a problem is that? I mean, is SaaS a significant component of your overall spend that's becoming, something that is causing a fair bit of frustration?
I think that it's the trend that worries me or not worries me, I mean, but it's the trend that I'm concerned about, right? Right now, I would say it's not a huge component of our spend, but the direction is that, we're going to go, this a la carte model where people are going to be able to, the users of our platform are going to be able to say, yep, I want, this cloud service provider and these SaaS vendors, and then integrate those in and give me my essentially playground that I can go deploy my services in, right? So, while the numbers I think are maybe not as big as the cloud service vendors today, it is definitely a growing thing. And for us, anytime more than a few teams start using it at the city scale, like that's going to be a significant number attached to that. So, that becomes a thing that we got to treat fairly seriously.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying there in terms of being able to sort of get those together and have that view of the total cost. I've always told customers, if an application dictates you need a specific expensive licensed operating system, that shouldn't be maybe looked at as a cloud cost. Should you be considering that as an application cost because it's the application that dictates that? Really
Hmm,
thinking,
that's good.
forget about where the cost comes in on whose bill. Think about where the requirement has come from. If you can get another version that doesn't require that licensed operating system, well, that sort of really proves the point. So
Hmm,
it's always
hmm,
good to really let's have a think about where the costs are actually being dictated.
hmm, hmm.
Um, so on to some of the answers, all the magical answers that you're going to solve for everyone. Transparency. How are you starting to tackle the problem of transparency in SaaS, and what are some of the unique approaches that are maybe giving you some runs and some wins on the board?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, right, like for our platform, it's really important that we sort of provide this like overall holistic view of the usage and cost. So we're spending a bit of time here, on the taxonomy and normalization of the cost data and the different billing concepts, so that we can sort of not necessarily pass down all of the complexity to our users, but get them to kind of understand the necessary pieces of that. So, a lot of that I think comes with the fact that uh, you know because we're an integrated platform, that that our consumers are almost like treat us like almost like a managed service provider, right? So. Because we're this separate organization which within Citi that is vending technology to the rest of the firm. I think there's a couple of different ways that people can go about providing this transparency, and we've sort of seen both of them at Citi in the past, where you can have this central team kind of take ownership of this problem and try to drive solutions for it. You can also have sort of these disparate teams that become the center of excellence, the COE for a particular vendor, because they sort of go out first and say, I want to use vendor X. They become the center of excellence. They can then provide some kind of platform capability for other people to use. I'm biased, obviously. I think the central approach works better for providing this transparency. You just can't. I mean, personally, I can't imagine disparate teams being able to like unify these different concepts, and so that the end consumer is able to see one, kind of nice picture of their usage and their costs. Uh, but obviously as a large organization, we can sort of have this centralized approach to doing this. And you sort of mentioned this already, but like I think the taxonomy extending out to SaaS is really an important thing. I mean, we're obviously creating our own version because of the need, but if there was something out there, we would love to use it, right? Because it's less kind of city specific than and more industry standard that way.
Yep. And in terms of the requirements to be able to give transparency, if you can't put any business information on there like cost centers or departments, you're not going to be able to get that out. Have the people that are making the decision, those central teams or even some of the teams are on their own, are they taking that into account? Are they taking the transparency requirement of reporting after purchase? Is that in the purchase decision? Are they aware of that yet, or is that still a gap that we should be reaching out to the people that are making these decisions saying, hey, there's this FinOps stuff that we need to make sure is in the requirements?
I think if you don't have a central team that's really versed in FinOps uh, and really incentivized to go solve some of these problems, what would often happen is these vendors would get treated as sort of that static, subscription-based model that we discussed, where people sort of, decide maybe at a beginning, like, okay, for the next year, we're going to sign up for, up to this amount, and we're going to roughly divide it this way, right? Because these teams, their primary goal is not to provide, cost management and FinOps capabilities. Their primary goal is to go build, business value on top of these vendors, right? So, I think that's maybe some of the downsides of going that distributed route. Whereas, when we have the central team, we know, look, we have to get things normalized. We have to get things, essentially accounted for and accurately charged, especially in a place like Citi where you're dealing with different legal entities. You can't really indirectly fund another legal entity. So it's imperative that like we get accurate chargeback, for based on specific usage of certain things. But so yeah, I would say I'm a big advocate for the centralized model. If your organization is large and complex, or not all of your spend goes under one engineering team because there's multiple products and multiple maybe organizations that have engineering teams, then you sort of need this kind of granular, more focused kind of approach for FinOps.
Yeah, and it's interesting. One of the think back to my heady days in well architected. One of the best practices was around making sure that do you factor cost optimization into the selection of services? But I think with SaaS, it's almost a case of is this particular product going to be usable with FinOps? Does this product allow you to execute FinOps? If it doesn't have the granularity, if it doesn't have things like tagging, you're not going to be able to do FinOps. You simply can't say go and do
Mm-hmm.
tagging if the product doesn't support it. So are the requirements that you have of FinOps going to be in those particular SaaS services? We know cloud. I think there was one vendor that was lagging. Can do it by default, and we're all used to the cloud being able to do tagging and granularity and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
hey, we've got to make sure that our SaaS providers have the same features that we expect them to. So that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a bit kind of a minimum level that I feel like everybody needs to kind of provide, and then bells and whistles on top of that, great. But there's a minimum levels that allow you to do cost allocation and drive that accountability that I think everybody needs to provide.
Yeah, and again, JR, Mike, FinOps Foundation. What are the minimum requirements needed to be able to execute FinOps? Would be a
Mm,
great little cheat sheet that we can have when we're picking vendors or services, things like that.
yeah.
So right now we're going to cut to a mailbag section. This is where we answer questions from you, the viewers, that you have about the previous episode. If you do have any questions or any feedback, you can send them to feedback@finopsfridays.com. all one word, and we'll answer those. So across to the mailbag questions. Hi and welcome to the mailbag for the previous episode. This was the episode where Todd Tucker put the fin into FinOps. So the first question, how does TBM and FinOps complement each other to help companies move to the cloud? I think as Todd was saying, it helps you to understand, both have the same objective. They help you to understand the cost of delivering in terms that your business partners understand. This enables you to take action and actually get better at what your company and organization actually does. From a TBM perspective, it's looking at and going from server and storage cost to the cost of an application to you. FinOps has that domain specificity, that real deep cloud knowledge and approach. It also has the scale and automation and policies in place. Just like what does cloud bring to IT that, data centers did, the comparison there, it's similar. It's trying to do the same thing, service your organization, giving that knowledge and understanding to be able to take action. It does it at a much larger scale. It also includes things like you're able to put policies in place, automate, so you can do this much, much faster and iterate and get better as well. As Todd said, TBM is somewhat an analog version of FinOps. On to the next question. How can we drive more predictability from our cloud spend to please finance? More inputs. Again, we think about cloud, it's lots of change, lots of things happening all the time. The more inputs you can get from your cloud into your financial models, into the financial team, they've got more to work with. They can make it more accurate, more frequently. Again, things are always changing, that rapid pace of innovation and change. Make sure that those changes and innovations are going to the finance team so they can correct and adjust the models as appropriate. And also better communication between your engineers and finance. Make sure that when your engineers, your DevOps, when people are building things, they understand that there's a financial impact and are able to sort of put that information from their day job to that financial model. Every time they bring up something, send a quick message across saying, hey, we changed this, we're doing this, we just deployed that, adjust the models as part of the process. So having that very tight loop between the engineers, the DevOps, and the finance teams. And on to the final question. How do you incentivize folks to optimize their cloud spend? We covered this a little bit in Maddie's episode as well, so go back and have a look at that. Looking at the carrot and stick approach. The stick, you put KPIs around people's jobs. It's part of their job description. It's an inherent part. Doing FinOps is part of your job. Once that happens, you've then got all the same processes that if anyone's failing at any other part of their job, FinOps is now part of that. You've got the usual organization, HR methods in place to make sure that they're improving and they're making sure that there is some ramifications if they're not doing their job appropriately. So just make sure FinOps is part of their job and that's very clear and well understood. From a carrot perspective, incentives that actually matter to the team. Like, yes, you can give them some cold pizza and some warm Coke, but that's really not meaningless. These people can go and buy those things. So making sure that they've got more staff to do their jobs. What makes their job better and easier for them when they're doing a good job? They're the sort of things that we need to see coming through. You can make it more enjoyable. Things like gamification. We may have a future episode coming up where we go a lot deeper into that, which will be a great episode. And also respect. Give them purpose. Make sure that if somebody comes to you and says, we can get all these savings, I've spent months and months working on this, we can really get efficient, and then it just gets sidelined and sidetracked, that's going to completely demoralize and kill that person. Chances are they'll probably leave the company. So making sure that you're giving FinOps the focus and the value and it is cherished by the organization because of the immense value that it can deliver to the organization. So that's it for today's mailbag. Again, if you have any feedback or you'd like to ask a question, feel free to email us at feedback@finopsfridays.com. Back to the show. All right, welcome back. On to our last topic, accountability. So a challenge to get everything together. We've managed to finally piece it together. We've got some rudimentary level of transparency. Maybe we've got some great transparency. We've now got to start to make people accountable. How are you starting to solve the accountability challenge? We sign up to particular licenses. Some of the licensing agreements may be pretty rigid. How do you get that accountability to change users' behaviors and make sure that we're being good with our costs?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's definitely a culture shift in most places that needs to be driven, and part of it is, look, coming to the realization that the nanny approach doesn't work, right? And I think FinOps, sort of makes this pretty clear that, look, a central team is not going to be a central team is useful in many cases, but it can't necessarily like swing a magic wand and just all of a sudden make your whole organization efficient. It's got to come from the teams, the consumers, the finance departments working together and sort of really caring about this and putting time and effort into this. So uh, I think, a few things I've seen working, right, like is, we sort of touched on it earlier, even from the procurement time, sort of get an understanding of, hey, is this something that is a dynamic consumption model, like something where you got to put more FinOps effort into versus kind of the static model, and then sort of build a plan from the beginning. It doesn't have to be a fully flushed out fancy allocation model, but you're starting from something rather than just completely turning a blind eye to it till it becomes a problem in your organization. The breaking down the silos thing, obviously, like folks talk about, but again, now with SaaS and the vendors and the different concepts, this becomes even more of a problem. The only way to avoid these surprises is to have frequent communication lines. Uh, you know, uh, I'm engineer at heart, been doing engineering for a long time. I think we got to take the kid gloves off where we're sort of treating engineering teams, like with care and saying, somebody else is going to take care of this. No, sorry, we're in a infrastructure platform in a world where we are, doing consumption-based billing now. Everything we do has a cost impact. So you have to understand your architectures and the impacts of your decisions, releases, and whatnot. The same way we hold engineering teams accountable today to be more DevOps focused and build resiliency and all those kinds of good things with our software. We got to hold our engineers accountable for the financial side as well, right? And the last thing I'd say is really reward the excellence that teams will fiscal responsibility and excellence that they have. Gamification is another way that you sort of give people a view of how they're doing, but then you also let them see how others are doing, whether it's in your organization or in other companies in your kind of area or whatnot. This naturally, I think, motivates people to to take it more seriously and drive, kind of spend efficiencies. So I wouldn't say a ton of things that are SaaS specific because really, in my mind, these are cloud and SaaS, have all these similarities. So, but yeah, those are some of the things I feel like I've seen that have worked in the past.
Yeah, and you mentioned everything's got a cost impact. Hopefully, too many people haven't dropped off when we started to talk about the complexities and challenges. But the other way I like to explain it is the costs have always been there, but all this detail, all these different pricing plans, all these different pricing line items and everything that comes in. These are new opportunities that you can use and leverage to optimize. Just
Hmm.
because you've got them doesn't mean you must be capable in every single way to be able to optimize every single different thing that you have, but just see them more as potential opportunities to get better and more efficient. Yes, it's complex, but these are things you can learn to get better and use to your advantage. So don't
Yeah.
freak out when you can't do everything with all the different particular quirkiness of each different pricing model. And I like what you said before, you need to start to build out your model. And I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake. The model that you've got now will not be the model you've got in 5 years. That doesn't
Hmm.
mean you need to build the model out for 5 years. You need to start now.
Right.
Build that capability over time. Don't freak out that you can't get the perfect answer done now. Start slow and start improving. Improving, you may change direction. So it's always good to take that first step and just iterate as much as possible.
I agree. Yeah.
And the other thing I like in terms of you're saying, how do you also look towards process improvement? Do you need to inject, and I think this is a common one, making sure that you've got FinOps in your business processes for something like SaaS. When you go to procure a license, hey, let's do a quick check to see if a license is
Hmm.
unused, that we can reallocate. Very small, simple step, new process instantly gives you some benefit. So little
Benefits. Yeah.
things like that are awesome to look out for.
Yeah.
So that's it for today's episode. Udam, it has been awesome. Thank you very, very much. Some final remarks for our viewers. What would you sort of say is the takeaway message to our viewers, message to the vendors? What should we be keeping in the back of our minds when we're thinking and talking about SaaS?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say it's not all gloom and doom, right? Like there's a lot of exciting things happening, and the more diversity here in vendors and offerings, that's all beneficial for the larger goal of building great engineering solutions and business solutions, right? But these are real problems. They're coming down the pipe. I'm sure, just like every other set of problems in whatever other space. When there's a problem, there's going to be some innovation that happens and some solutions that come down the pipe. But because there really aren't good solutions today for this, we've chosen to obviously go build out our own solution. But generally speaking, I would prefer to, have standardized approaches for this. So I look forward to having more collaboration, on these topics. I think there's a few different areas and challenges here that the vendors themselves, need to provide some mature solutions in the cost management space. Maybe if we're lucky, some normalization of terminology and concepts, maybe some convergence there. The consumers need tooling, right? Even if each, or some vendors provide good capabilities, we still can't depend on everybody going to each vendor's specific solution to then get a good understanding of usage and cost. So, some way to kind of unify this and show the larger picture, preferably at an application or use case level. I think that's a huge opportunity. And then really for kind of open source frameworks and foundations like FinOps to really sort of start looking at SaaS as this emerging kind of area and start preparing to kind of treat it as a kind of a similar problem to cloud, right? So that these vendors, can sort of or we have a chance really to do good financial management for these vendors as well. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure being here and talking through these challenges, and we'll see what the future holds in this space.
Excellent. And it's going to be interesting to see where we end up in like 10 years, 20 years time, how it
Yeah,
all
to
sort
look
of
back.
settled out and do we get it together? I look at other industries and the lack of standardization, the fact that it's going the wrong way, maybe some cause for concern, but we'll see how we go. So
Yeah.
everyone, thank you very much. That is a wrap. As always, if you have any questions from today's episode, please feel free to reach out feedback at finopsfridays.com and we'll be more than happy to provide you some answers there. So enjoy the rest of your day. And Udam, again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.